Get out of here, you worthless nobody. Those were the exact words my daughter Vanessa screamed straight into my face at her engagement party, right in front of all the guests. She threw me out of the house as if I were trash. She had no idea that I, Cynthia, 68 years old, had just sold my company for $34 million. But that day, I chose silence. I said, "All right, sweetheart," and quietly walked away without arguing. The next day, I moved back into my small cabin in the mountains of Colorado. 3 weeks later, she would be the one on her knees begging for my forgiveness. It all began when I showed up at Vanessa's engagement party with Richard. I brought a valuable gift, a real pearl necklace I had bought in Paris. I felt emotional at the thought of sharing this joy with my only daughter. But the moment I walked in, I noticed the condescending stares. Guests whispered. Richard ignored me, and Vanessa looked embarrassed by my presence. "Mom, what are you doing here?" she asked coldly, as I approached to congratulate her. "I came to celebrate with you, honey. Today is your engagement," I answered. Vanessa looked me up and down, scrutinizing my simple coffee-colored dress and old shoes. She had no clue that beneath this modest appearance stood a woman who could buy that entire room without blinking. "Listen, Mom," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "This is a high-class event, filled with important people. You can't just show up dressed like a maid and pretend to belong here." Her words cut through me like knives. Several guests snickered. Richard came over with a sly smile on his lips. "Cynthia, I think you should go. This isn't really the place for you." I kept my composure. Though my heart was breaking, "I only wanted to give her this," I said, handing over the box with the necklace. Vanessa grabbed it without even opening it. "Thanks. But next time, ask before you come. The event is for everyone." The humiliation was total. More than 40 pairs of eyes were glued to me, as if I were an intruder. And yet, the worst was still to come. Margaret, Richard's mother, walked over with a patronizing air. "Dear Cynthia, I know you want the best for Vanessa, but she's part of our family now. A family with social standing. Perhaps it's best if you keep your distance." Vanessa nodded in agreement. "Mom, Margaret is right. I need you to understand your place. I'm no longer the little girl who depended on you. Now I have a prosperous life, a bright future. And honestly, you embarrass me." My world shattered in that moment. I thought of all the years I worked myself to the bone so she could have a proper education, the sacrifices I made so she would never go without. I even sold my first apartment to pay for her college. I gave up my own chance at love to raise her, and now she treated me as a burden. "Embarrassing," I repeated, my voice trembling. Guests leaned in to listen. Vanessa put her hands on her hips, defiant. "That's right, Mom. Embarrassing. Look around you, successful entrepreneurs, top professionals. What can you possibly contribute? What could you talk about with them?" Richard cut in with calculated cruelty. "Let's be honest, Cynthia. You live in a rented apartment. No savings. No degree. Vanessa deserves to be with people on her level." Their words stabbed me over and over. Margaret added her poison with fake politeness. "Nothing personal, dear. We just believe Vanessa should focus on her new life without being weighed down by the past." Vanessa stepped closer, her eyes filled with contempt. "I don't want you at the wedding. I don't want you to be a part of my new life. You belong in the past, and that's where you should stay." The room went dead silent. More than 40 pairs of eyes watched, waiting for my reaction. My soul felt shattered, but a voice that had been silent inside me for decades suddenly woke up. For the first time in my life, my daughter crossed a line she could never uncross. At that very moment, I decided I would never swallow my pride again. "All right, sweetheart," I said, my voice so calm it surprised even me. "You're right. I'm no longer a part of your life." As I left, I heard the mocking whispers. Poor old woman. So pathetic. That night, alone in my apartment, I made a decision that would change everything forever. I cried harder than I had in decades, but beneath the tears, a quiet strength began to rise, a cold, calculating anger, a determination that had slept too long. I opened the secret drawer where I kept documents no one knew about: bank statements, property deeds, investment certificates, $34 million waiting for my command. Vanessa had no idea who her mother really was. To her, I was just a poor, pitiful old woman. But the truth was very different. For 40 years, I had built a financial empire in silence. While she studied and played, I invested every dollar I earned. Real estate in 3 different states, shares in multinational corporations, high-yield investment funds, all under my name. At dawn, I called my attorney, Anthony. "I need to see you urgently," I said. "It's time to activate the plan we've prepared for so many years." He managed every transaction, protected the assets, and kept my secrets for decades. "So you're finally going to reveal your enormous fortune?" he asked, curious. "Not exactly," I replied with a bitter smile. "I'm going to disappear for a while. But first, I want Vanessa to learn a lesson she'll never forget." Anthony understood instantly. He knew the whole story of my sacrifices for my daughter and how I had suffered in silence. That morning, I packed only the essentials: 3 suitcases of simple clothes, a few personal documents, and some photos of Vanessa as a child. Everything else I left behind. I wanted it to look like I had truly left as a defeated, humiliated woman, but the truth was completely different. While packing, I remembered the day Vanessa came into my life through an adoption file. I was 30 years old, single, and decided to take her in when no one else wanted her. Those first years were extremely difficult. I worked 3 jobs to raise her and studied at night to advance my career. I gave up my entire personal life to devote myself fully to her. Every dollar I earned was split in 2. Half for basic expenses, the other half invested to secure the future. Vanessa never knew she was adopted. I told her her father had died when she was very young. She never questioned it, never asked for more details. She just accepted that we were a family of 2, and I poured my whole soul into being the best mother I could. Apparently, that still wasn't enough. I called Edward, my trusted accountant. "I want you to transfer $5 million to the Swiss account," I ordered, "and prepare the files to activate the European assets. I'll be away for an indefinite period." Edward had worked with me for 20 years. He knew once I made a decision, I wouldn't change it. "If Vanessa asks about you, what should I say?" he asked carefully. "But Edward, keep all of my assets safe. I may need them sooner than expected." Before leaving, I wrote a letter but didn't send it. "Dear Vanessa, for 68 years I lived for others, first for your grandparents, then entirely for you. I never asked myself what I truly wanted. Yesterday you gave me the answer. I want dignity. I want respect. And if I can't have that by your side, I'll go find it elsewhere. Your mother, no longer a burden." The taxi arrived at 6 a.m., a black Mercedes I hired to take me straight to the private airport outside Denver. But before leaving, I made one more call. "Richard?" I said when he answered, clearly surprised. "It's Cynthia. I just wanted to thank you." "Thank me? For what?" he asked, confused. "For showing me who you really are, and for showing me what my daughter has become by being with you." I hung up before he could reply. The private jet was waiting on the runway. Destination: Zurich, Switzerland. My wooden chalet in the Alps, a quiet refuge, was ready for me to plan the next step. But before boarding, I made another decision. I called Daisy, Vanessa's longtime housekeeper. Daisy, this is Cynthia. Can you do something for me? Daisy had always been kind to me, unlike my daughter. Of course, Mrs. Cynthia, what do you need? Keep an eye on everything happening in that house over the next few weeks. If anything important comes up, call me at this number. During the flight, I opened my tablet and checked the accounts. Tens of millions of dollars strategically spread across the globe. Properties in Miami, Chicago, Seattle. And of course, the beautiful chalet in Switzerland where no one would find me until I wanted to be found. As the plane crossed the Atlantic, I smiled for the first time in years. Vanessa had gotten exactly what she wanted: freedom from the mother who embarrassed her. But soon, she would realize she had made the biggest mistake of her life. The chalet in the Alps was the perfect headquarters. From the window, I could see snow-covered peaks, a landscape that brought peace and clarity. I had bought the place 5 years earlier as an investment, and now it became the command center for my plan. The first week, I rested and cleared my mind. By the second week, Daisy called with news that reignited my fury. Mrs. Cynthia, you need to know what's happening. Vanessa is telling everyone you left because you couldn't keep up with her lifestyle, that you were a financial burden and just disappeared. I asked, anger rising in my chest. What else did she say? Daisy answered. She told people you never had savings, that you lived on loans, and that the truth finally caught up with you. Richard bragged at his office that his mother-in-law was a troublesome nobody. And Margaret, Daisy hesitated. She's throwing a party to celebrate that you're gone. My hands shook with rage. Not only had they humiliated me publicly, now they were tarnishing my reputation to paint themselves as heroes. Vanessa had turned my departure into her personal victory. This could not go unpunished. That very night, I called Anthony. I want you to investigate everything about Richard and his family. Where the money comes from, how the business runs, debts, enemies, secrets, everything. Anthony was an outstanding lawyer with connections everywhere. If there was anything to uncover about my future son-in-law, he would find it. I also need you to hire a private investigator, I continued. I need photos, videos, audio recordings. Record every move Vanessa and Richard make over the next few weeks, but be absolutely discreet. They must not know we're watching. 3 days later, Anthony called back with shocking news. Cynthia, I found something very noteworthy about Richard. His company is on the verge of collapse. He owes about $3 million to various suppliers. The bank is threatening to foreclose on his headquarters. He's been masking it with borrowed money. Does Vanessa know? I asked, more curious than ever. In reality, he's counting on you to leave an inheritance to save the business, which is why he was so angry when you left empty-handed. How ironic. Richard despised me, thinking I was poor, while he was the one about to fall apart. And my daughter, the one who drove me away for being embarrassing, was about to marry a man who couldn't even pay his own debts. A week later, the investigator sent a video that changed everything. Richard at an upscale restaurant with a young woman, clearly not a business meeting. They held hands, kissed, acted like lovers. The footage was dated after his engagement to Vanessa. Perfect, I whispered as I watched it a third time. This was exactly what I needed. But before using it, I wanted to test something, to see whether my daughter's cruelty had any limits. I called Vanessa from a private number, pretending to be a social worker. Miss Vanessa, we're trying to reach your mother, Cynthia. There are some important documents to deliver. My mother doesn't live here anymore, Vanessa answered coldly on the phone. She left because she couldn't take care of herself. I suppose she's in some nursing home. I'm not responsible for her. Her words cut like a knife. She didn't even bother to pretend she cared. Don't you have any other contact number? This concerns a family inheritance, I pressed. Vanessa gave a cruel laugh. Inheritance? My mother never came from a wealthy family. Must be a mistake. And even if it were true, she's no longer part of my life. Try somewhere else. I hung up. Tears streamed down my face, but a steely resolve rose inside me. My own daughter had just signed her own sentence. She hadn't only kicked me out of her life, she'd denied even the possibility that I might inherit. It was time for her to learn who Cynthia really was. That night, from my study in the chalet in Switzerland, I began to draw up the plan for revenge. First, I would investigate Richard's financial situation thoroughly. Second, I would use the video of his infidelity at the perfect moment. Third, I would return to the United States when they least expected it. Not as the humiliated woman who had left, but as a truly powerful woman. I called Edward, my longtime accountant. Prepare all the documents on my properties and investments. We'll need this irrefutable evidence soon. Are you planning to reveal your entire fortune? He asked. No, only enough, I replied, smiling. The plan began to take shape. Vanessa thought she had escaped the mother who embarrassed her. But soon she would learn she had discarded the only person who had loved her unconditionally, and when she realized her mistake, it would be too late. By the 4th week in Switzerland, new news only stoked my appetite for justice. Daisy, the loyal housekeeper, called in a panic. Mrs. Cynthia, you have to hear this. Vanessa is planning to sell the apartment you used to live in. That can't be. That apartment is in my name. She's telling people you signed a power of attorney before you left, that you were so desperate you signed everything away so you wouldn't be a burden. Blood boiled in my veins. They weren't just inventing lies about my departure. They were trying to seize my property. But Vanessa had made a fatal mistake. That apartment was only a tiny part of my vast holdings. Daisy, I said, calm but icy. Record every time Vanessa says I'm poor. Every time she mentions the fake power of attorney. Every time she mocks me. Record every word. That afternoon, I called Anthony, my attorney. Vanessa is trying to sell a property that isn't hers using forged documents. File suit immediately. You want to sue for fraud now? He asked. Not yet. Let them sink deeper into their lies. When they are fully exposed, we will strike. Meanwhile, the private investigator sent more devastating information about Richard. He wasn't just bankrupt and unfaithful. He had been using Vanessa's name to take out loans she didn't know about. My daughter was about to marry a con man who would drag her into ruin. For a moment I wanted to warn her despite how she had hurt me. She was still my daughter, but then I remembered her merciless words. You embarrass me. I don't want you in my new life. She had chosen. Now she had to live with the consequences. In the 5th week, Daisy sent me an audio clip that broke my heart. At Vanessa's bachelorette party, one of her friends asked, "Won't your mother be at the wedding?" "Thank God, no," Vanessa replied. Finally, she knows her place. The mocking laughter rang in my ears, and I knew I had cried for the last time over my child. At dawn, sorrow turned into an unyielding resolve. I called Anthony. Book me a presidential suite at the most luxurious hotel in New York. Hire discreet security and a professional photographer. It's time for me to return. Are you sure? He asked. More certain than ever, I replied. Before leaving, I called my personal stylist in Los Angeles. I need a complete transformation. Hair, makeup, wardrobe. I want to appear as the successful woman I truly am. I also hired a private driver with the newest Mercedes and a small security detail to make sure my return would be unforgettable. In the 6th week, while Vanessa finalized every detail for the wedding, I finalized every detail for revenge. The investigator confirmed Richard had scheduled Vanessa to meet him at the notary's office right after the wedding, apparently to trick her into signing papers that would saddle her with all his debts. "Will you warn her?" Anthony asked as I handed him the evidence. "She made her choice when she threw me out of her life," I answered coldly. "Now she'll learn that every decision has consequences, and the one she despised was the only person who ever protected her." That night, I wrote 3 letters. One to Vanessa, to be delivered at the perfect moment. One to Richard, a declaration of war. And one to Margaret Richards' mother to make sure she paid for insulting me. The plan was complete. I would return to America 2 days before the wedding. I'd settle into the most luxurious hotel, then stage a series of public appearances that would leave everyone speechless. Vanessa wanted to erase her embarrassing mother. Very soon, she would face a woman who could buy her entire new family without blinking. As I packed my finest jewelry and designer dresses, I smiled with anticipation. Vanessa, the little girl who once called me Mom with sweetness, was about to realize the most costly mistake of her life. My return to New York went exactly as planned. Striking, elegant, and completely unexpected. The sleek black Mercedes pulled up to the Grand Manhattan Hotel, the city's most luxurious. Bellhops rushed to unload my luggage as I stepped out, completely transformed. My hair freshly cut and styled by the famous Los Angeles stylist, a fiery red dress worth more than many people's annual salary, and diamonds sparkling under the lobby lights. The receptionist instantly sensed my presence, even without knowing who I was. "Welcome to the Grand Manhattan, ma'am. Your presidential suite is ready." In the private elevator, I felt the stares of curiosity and admiration from other guests. After 6 weeks of pain from being abandoned by my daughter, I had finally reclaimed the powerful woman I truly was. That afternoon, as planned, I made my first public appearance. I knew exactly the places Vanessa and her social circle frequented. First stop, the city's most exclusive boutique, where Margaret Richards' mother often shopped. It was time for the woman who once called me a shadow of the past to see the truth. I entered the store like a silent storm. Staff rushed to greet me, recognizing a high-caliber client. "How can we help you, ma'am?" the manager asked with a polished smile. "I want to see your most exclusive collection." "Price is not an issue," I replied with authority. As I browsed gowns worth tens of thousands, a familiar voice gasped behind me. "Cynthia?" Margaret's eyes widened, almost in disbelief. I turned slowly, smiling with precision. "Margaret, what a surprise to see you here." "But you left. You're not supposed to be," she stammered. "Begging somewhere, in a nursing home or starving?" I cut in, my voice calm but razor sharp. Her face flushed red as she realized I had heard every lie they had spread. At that moment, staff presented 3 exquisite gowns. "These are our most special pieces. A Valentino at $8,000, a Versace at $10,000, and a limited edition Chanel at $15,000. Without hesitation, I pointed, "I'll take all 3, and bring me your jewelry collection." Margaret froze, watching me spend in 5 minutes more than her income in 5 years. "This can't be. Vanessa said you had nothing, that you were a burden," she mumbled. "Dear Margaret," I said smoothly, while trying on a diamond necklace worth $5,000. "Perhaps my daughter doesn't know her mother as well as you think. A modest apartment, simple clothes, that's called humility. Some of us need to be sure we're loved for who we are, not for what we own. Perhaps I failed that lesson with my own daughter." The manager returned with a tray of diamonds, sparkling like a galaxy. "Which set do you prefer, ma'am?" I chose a necklace, bracelet, and earrings worth $35,000. Perfect. Put it all on my black card. When I pulled out the unlimited credit card, Margaret nearly fainted. As I signed the bill, I looked her in the eye and said, "Send a message to Vanessa for me. Tell her the mother she was ashamed of has returned. And tell her that on her wedding day, she will receive a gift she'll never forget." Are you coming to the wedding?" Margaret's voice trembled. "Oh no." I smiled, wickedly. She made it very clear I wasn't welcome, but that doesn't mean I can't send a gift. I left the boutique, Margaret stunned and shaking. I knew within the hour Vanessa would get a frantic call from her. Exactly as I wanted, my daughter would know I had returned, but have no idea what I was really planning. That night, from my presidential suite, I called Edward. "Completely," he replied. "Property deeds, bank statements, recordings, photos from the investigator, everything arranged for maximum impact. Perfect. Tomorrow is the wedding. It's time for Vanessa to learn who her mother really is." Before sleeping, I called Daisy. "How are things at the house?" "Mrs. Cynthia, everything is chaos." Margaret ran to tell Vanessa about the encounter at the boutique. Vanessa is both furious and confused. Richard looks terrified. "No one understands how you could possibly spend that much money." "Did they mention canceling the wedding?" I asked. "Not yet, but the fights are explosive." Vanessa screamed at Margaret for lying, and Margaret tried to deny it. That news sounded like sweet music to my ears. The chaos had only just begun. Tomorrow would be only the opening act of a play that would destroy everyone who betrayed me. As I gazed at the New York skyline from my window, I thought of the little girl who once clung to me and whispered I was the best mom in the world. That little girl was gone, replaced by a cruel woman who treated her mother like trash. Tomorrow, that woman would pay the price. The next morning, while Vanessa prepared for what she thought was the happiest day of her life, I prepared to turn it into her worst nightmare. From my presidential suite, I directed every move like a general before battle. The war had begun, and I held every weapon. Orchids to the church, along with a card. "To Vanessa, on the most important day of your life. With love, from the mother who is no longer a burden." I knew those words would unsettle her, but that was just the appetizer. While Vanessa slipped into her wedding gown, I finalized the grandest entrance of my life. The dress I chose was an Armani masterpiece in black, so luxurious it outshone the cost of her entire wedding. The jewelry I paired with it was worth as much as a house in the suburbs. Every detail was calculated to radiate power, elegance, and the dignity I had reclaimed. At exactly 2 p.m., as the church ceremony began, I launched Phase 2. I called Edward, my longtime lawyer and advisor. "It's time for the press conference." "Are you certain?" "After this, there's no turning back." "I'm more certain than ever. It's time this entire city learned the truth about Vanessa's so-called perfect family." The press conference was staged right in the Grand Hall of the Grand Manhattan Hotel, at the very same time as the religious ceremony. Reporters from the biggest outlets were already there, drawn by the promise of a shocking revelation tied to one of the most talked-about weddings of the season. When I walked in, the room fell silent. My transformation was so complete, many didn't recognize me at first. I spoke firmly. "My name is Cynthia Parker. I am the mother of Vanessa Parker, the bride currently being wed at St. Patrick's Cathedral. I am here to set the record straight about the lies my daughter has spread." Camera shutters exploded as reporters realized they were holding a media bombshell. In New York, these past weeks, my daughter told everyone her mother was a poor, useless woman who left in shame because she couldn't support herself. I paused for dramatic effect, then raised the first stack of documents. The truth is very different. I am the owner of an investment and real estate empire worth $34 million. The hall erupted, buzzing with disbelief. Reporters swarmed to photograph the evidence I presented. Property deeds across 3 states, bank statements, investment certificates, all real, verifiable, and utterly demolishing the story Vanessa had invented. My daughter cast me out of her life because she was ashamed to have a mother who wasn't socially worthy. What she never knew was that every dollar for this extravagant wedding, her elite education, every comfort she ever enjoyed came from the company I spent 40 years building with my blood and tears. At that moment, Edward stepped to the microphone with more explosive evidence. We have proof that Vanessa Parker attempted to sell property she did not own, using forged documents. We also have recordings where she mocked her mother's supposed poverty and celebrated her absence as a relief. He played the recording Daisy, my loyal housekeeper, had sent. Thank God she's gone. Pathetic. Always trying to impress with cheap gifts. Richard says she's probably begging somewhere by now. The entire hall fell silent. I stepped forward, knowing the final blow would be lethal. My daughter's fiancé, Richard Thompson, is not only bankrupt, but has also used Vanessa's name to borrow millions of dollars she knows nothing about. I have proof that as soon as tomorrow, after the honeymoon, he planned to force Vanessa to sign papers that would saddle her with more than $5 million of debt. Why reveal this now? Because a mother can forgive ingratitude, but she cannot stand by and watch her child be destroyed by a man who sees her as a financial lifeline. I replied with dignity. Do you intend to reconcile with your daughter? One female reporter asked. My daughter made her choice when she threw me out of her life, calling me useless. Now she must live with the consequences of discarding the brood, only person who ever loved her unconditionally. Just then, my phone rang. It was Daisy, calling from the church. Mrs. Cynthia, it's chaos here. Someone tipped them off about the press conference. Vanessa is losing her mind. Richard is pale as a ghost. Guests are abandoning the ceremony to read the news on their phones. Have they married yet? I asked. Yes, but the reception is canceled. Vanessa is screaming to see you immediately. Good. Tell her where I am, I replied, then hung up. I closed the press conference with a declaration I knew would be tomorrow's front-page headline. To all mothers watching, love your children, but never let that love become self-destruction. And to all ungrateful children, remember this. Your parents raised you with sacrifice, and they deserve respect, not humiliation. I left the hall to applause and blinding flashes, smiling in satisfaction. The first phase of my revenge was complete. Vanessa wanted a perfect wedding, free of the mother who embarrassed her. What she got instead was a ruined ceremony and a public scandal that would haunt her forever. I didn't have to wait long for the confrontation. 2 hours later, Vanessa stormed into my presidential suite like a hurricane. She had convinced security she was my daughter, which was true, though in that moment, I wished it weren't. She burst in, still wearing her wedding gown, but her makeup was smeared with tears of rage and humiliation. "How could you do this to me?" she screamed. "You destroyed my wedding, ruined the most important day of my life." I sat calmly on the sofa, sipping tea as though nothing had happened. "Hello, Vanessa," I said coldly. "You look beautiful, if a bit disheveled. How was the ceremony?" "Don't mock me," she roared, stepping closer and clenching her fists. "All the guests left. The press is blasting it everywhere. My reputation is destroyed." "How interesting," I replied, unshaken. "A few weeks ago, you said the exact same thing to me, that I embarrassed you, ruined your reputation, that you didn't want me in your life. But that's different," Vanessa stammered. "Different how?" I cut in, standing for the first time. "Different because when you humiliate your mother in front of 40 people, it's acceptable. But when I tell the truth in front of 40 reporters, it's wrong. My voice stayed calm, but fire burned in my eyes, fire that had been suppressed for decades. Vanessa fell silent, realizing for the first time that her mother was no longer apologizing or begging. "But you're my mother," she finally shouted, as if those words excused everything. "You're supposed to protect me, not betray me." "That's right," I said with a bitter smile. "I am your mother. And for 30 years, I protected you. I sacrificed everything, even my own happiness, for you. And how did you repay me? By throwing me out like garbage." "But the money! Why didn't you ever tell me you had money?" "Because I wanted you to love me for who I was, not for how much I had," I answered, my voice heavy with sorrow. I wanted to believe that love was real, not something that could be bought. It seems I was wrong, on both counts. At that moment, Richard appeared at the door, sweating, his face ghostly pale with panic. "Mrs. Cynthia," he stammered. "We need to talk. This is just a terrible misunderstanding." "Oh, the groom!" I sneered. "The man who told me I didn't belong here, that I was nothing but a burden to my own daughter." I didn't know," he stuttered. "You didn't know I had money, right?" "True. You didn't. But you knew you were bankrupt. You knew you had a mistress. And you knew you planned to use my daughter to save your collapsing company." Richard froze, his face white as a sheet. "What are you saying?" I pulled out my phone and opened the video the detective had sent. Richard passionately kissing another woman in an upscale restaurant. "Do you recognize this person?" I asked coldly. "According to my investigation, you've been seeing her the entire time you were engaged to Vanessa." Vanessa snapped her head toward her new husband, her eyes wide with horror. She asked, her voice breaking. Richard tried to deny it, but I pressed on with more evidence. "I also have the documents you planned to force her to sign tomorrow, contracts that would leave her holding $5 million of your debt." "That's a lie," Richard shouted desperately. "Those papers are fake." "Fake?" I smirked. "Edward, come in." My attorney, Edward, stepped in with a thick file. "Richard," he said calmly, "these documents were taken directly from your notary's office. All of them have been verified." Vanessa collapsed into a chair, finally realizing the full weight of her actions. She hadn't just cast out her wealthy mother, she had married a con man who was about to destroy her. "This can't be happening," she whispered over and over. "This can't be real." "Oh, but there's more." "Richard, why don't you tell your wife about the loans you took out in her name? About the mortgage you placed on the condo she thought was hers? And about the debt you owe to a gang that's due at the end of the month?" Richard stayed silent, a silence that confirmed everything. Vanessa stared at him, terror filling her eyes. "So it's all true? Everything my mother said is true?" "Vanessa, I can explain," he started, but was cut off by a furious slap. "You used me? You lied to me. I married a fraud," she screamed. "Why did you marry a man who despised your own mother?" I asked icily. "Every decision has consequences, Vanessa. You chose to believe him and cast me aside." Vanessa turned to me, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, I'm sorry. I was wrong. Please forgive me. Can we fix this?" "Fix this?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Like when I begged you not to throw me out of your life? Like when I pleaded to attend your wedding? Do you remember what you said then? You're no longer a part of my life. You belong to the past, so stay there." "I didn't know," she wailed. "I didn't know you had money. And that's exactly the problem," I answered, my voice heavy with sorrow. "Your love for me depended on the balance in my bank account. When you thought I was poor, you threw me away. Now that you know I'm rich, you want me back. That isn't love, Vanessa. That's convenience. The room fell into a heavy silence. For the first time in her life, Vanessa faced real consequences. She had lost her mother, married a fraud, and had her honor shredded in public, all because she chose status and money over unconditional love. She sat frozen, choking on the collapse of everything she thought she had. Richard tried to slip out, but Edward had already called hotel security and the police. Charges of fraud and forgery were being prepared. Vanessa finally spoke, her voice hoarse. "Mom, I know I was wrong. I treated you terribly. But you're my mother. You have to help me. My life is ruined. I need you to save me." "Save you?" I repeated bitterly. "Save you the way you saved me when you threw me out of your life? When you called me useless?" "But I'm your daughter. You're supposed to love me unconditionally," she screamed. "You're right," I replied calmly. "I do love you unconditionally. For 30 years, I loved without asking for anything. I gave you everything, gave up my own happiness for you. And when I needed you most, when I needed love and support, you threw me away like trash." At that moment, my phone rang. It was the detective, calling with breaking news. "Mrs. Cynthia. Richard just tried to empty the joint account he shares with Vanessa, transferring everything to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands." That was the final nail in the coffin. "Your husband just stole every cent of your savings," I said flatly to Vanessa. "He wired it to an offshore account 10 minutes ago." Vanessa turned pale as death. "What?" "Yes, sweetheart," I said coldly. "The man you chose over your own mother, the one you publicly humiliated me for, he just left you penniless." Richard, silent until now, suddenly roared, seizing the chance to lash out. "It's all your fault. Everything was perfect until you showed up with your lies." "Lies?" I laughed coldly. "The $34 million estate? Your bankruptcy? Your mistress? The forged papers? Every single thing has documented proof." "You destroyed my life!" he screamed. "No," I said firmly. "You destroyed your own life when you chose to deceive my daughter. I only made sure you paid the price for that choice." At that moment, the police entered the suite to handcuff Richard. The charges: fraud, forgery, and identity theft. As they dragged him away, he shouted at Vanessa, "This isn't over! You'll pay back every cent I lost because of you." His true colors fully exposed, Vanessa realized she had married a man who not only didn't love her, but also blamed her for his crimes. "Mom," Vanessa said once we were alone, "I know you're angry. I know you want to punish me. But please, don't abandon me. I have no one left." "You still have Margaret," I replied with biting sarcasm. "The one who told me to stay away because I didn't have the right social standing. I'm sure she'll help you now that you're the daughter-in-law of a criminal." "Margaret has already turned her back," Vanessa admitted, her head bowed in shame. "After the scandal, she said her family couldn't be associated with me. She banned me from her house." "Surprising, isn't it?" I said icily. "Your new family abandoned you at the first stumble, unlike me, who endured 30 years of ingratitude and only walked away when you threw me out." Just then, Daisy, my former housekeeper, arrived with more bad news. "Miss Vanessa," she said, with genuine sympathy, "Richard's creditors just came to the house. They took everything: furniture, TV, computers, even your wedding dress. They said they have the legal right because you unknowingly signed as guarantor." Vanessa collapsed completely. In less than 4 hours, she had lost her husband, her money, her possessions, her reputation, and her in-laws. "What do I do now?" she whispered, stunned. "I have nothing. I have no one." "Now you know exactly how I felt when you cast me out of your life," I said, without the slightest pity. "The difference is, back then I was 70, with 30 years of unconditional love invested in you. And you? You're 30, and you've just learned that every decision has consequences. There's no way you can forgive me? No way I can regain your love? She asked desperately. My love never disappeared, I answered, my voice heavy with sorrow. But my respect, my trust, and my willingness to be your victim are gone forever. Then, what will happen to me? She asked, trembling. You'll have to learn to live on your own, just as I had to when you drove me out of your life, I said, rising to end the conversation. You'll have to find work, pay your bills, and face the consequences of choosing money and status over true love. But Mom, I am no longer your mother. I cut her off sharply. You're the one who said, you're no longer part of my life. The mother, who sacrificed everything for you without asking anything in return, died the day you called me worthless and threw me out like garbage. I am Cynthia, successful woman, and I will never again tolerate disrespect. Vanessa left my suite sobbing, finally realizing she had lost the most precious thing of all, her mother's unconditional love. But it was too late for regret. Some wounds never heal. Some words can never be taken back. She had made her choice, and now she would live with the consequences for the rest of her life. 6 months later, from my beautiful villa in Colorado, I sipped breakfast tea while gazing at the snow-capped mountains. Perfect peace, broken only by birdsong and the whisper of wind through the trees. For the first time in 70 years, I was living for myself. Daisy still visited once a month. Bringing news from the city, Vanessa had found a job as a receptionist in a dental clinic, earning just enough to rent a small apartment in a modest neighborhood. Richard had been sentenced to 5 years in prison for fraud and forgery. Margaret had lost her social standing after it came out she had covered for her son's crimes. Has Vanessa asked about you? Daisy inquired during her most recent visit. Every day, I replied coolly, but that's no longer my concern. She chose her path when she cast me aside. Now, she must walk it alone. Daisy nodded, though her eyes still carried a flicker of pity for my daughter. Justice had come complete and merciless. The press followed the story for months, turning it into a symbol of ingratitude and its price. Vanessa not only lost her social standing, but most of her friends as well. The scandal spread across the country. Edward called me weekly with updates on the legal proceedings. Richard appealed the sentence, but it was denied. He reported most recently. He even tried to sue Vanessa for emotional distress, but the judge dismissed it immediately as baseless. How pathetic, I replied calmly. Even in prison, he still blames others. Have you thought about reaching out to Vanessa? Edward asked cautiously. Elias said she went to the bank asking about you, wanting to send you a letter. No, I answered firmly. That woman died to me the day she called me worthless. If she wants to contact me, she can do it through official channels, like a stranger. But Edward's question lingered in my mind for days. Did I miss my daughter? The answer was complicated. I missed the little girl who used to write me letters, who hugged me during nightmares, who once called me her best friend. But the cruel woman who threw me out like trash? No, I missed nothing about her. One afternoon, while sorting through old family photos, I found a letter Vanessa wrote at 8 years old. Dear Mommy, you are the best mom in the whole world. When I grow up, I want to be just like you. Strong, hardworking, and full of love. I love you more than the stars and the moon. Tears fell as I read those innocent words. That night, I wrote in my journal, the little girl who wrote this letter would have defended her mother against anyone, would have valued love and sacrifice over money and status. But that little girl grew into a woman who chose cruelty over compassion. I cannot forgive that woman, just because I once loved the child she used to be. That fall, Edward visited, bringing financial updates and something more. Vanessa is trying to reach you. She says she understands her mistakes and is ready to do anything to win back your love. Anything? I sneered. Even turn back time so she never called me worthless? She's in pieces, Edward said firmly. Physically, mentally, financially. She's lost weight, looks 10 years older, and according to Daisy, she cries every single day. Good, I replied coldly, surprised by my own lack of pity. Now she knows exactly how I felt in those 6 weeks when I thought I had lost her forever. On the 1-year anniversary of my departure, I was in Paris, buying artwork for my private gallery. As I walked through the Louvre, I remembered all the times I had dreamed of traveling, only to give it up for Vanessa. Now I was 71, a millionaire, and finally able to do everything I had once set aside for motherhood. That night, from my hotel suite, I called Daisy for an update. "Mrs. Cynthia," she said sadly. "Vanessa collapsed at work last week. They admitted her to the hospital for malnutrition and stress. The doctors say her mental state is very serious." "And?" I asked evenly. "That was predictable. Cruel choices carry cruel consequences. She asks every day if you'll forgive her," Daisy pleaded. "She says she'd rather die than live knowing she's lost you forever." "She should have thought of that before she threw me out like garbage," I replied coldly. I too wished for death in those weeks after her betrayal. The difference is, I didn't deserve that pain. Hanging up, I stepped onto the balcony, gazing at the lights of Paris, the city of love. How ironic. I had peace, prosperity, dignity, but I had forever lost the illusion of unconditional love from a child. The price was steep, but it was the price Vanessa had imposed on our relationship when she chose to publicly humiliate me. My final reflection closed the last page of my memoir. I do not regret adopting her when no one else would. I do not regret sacrificing 30 years for her happiness. The only thing I regret is not realizing sooner that kindness should never come at the cost of self-destruction. The story was over. Cynthia, the selfless, humiliated mother, was gone. In her place stood Cynthia, the free, prosperous woman, at peace with herself. And for the first time in 71 years, that was enough. 5 years passed since the day my life changed forever. At 75, I stood on the terrace of my new villa on the Côte d'Azur, watching the sun set over the Mediterranean. The peace was so deep that sometimes I could barely remember the broken woman I once was. Pain had turned to wisdom, betrayal into liberation. My life had blossomed in ways I had never dared dream. The gallery I opened in Monte Carlo had become one of the most prestigious in Europe. My portfolio had grown to $50 million. But more important than material wealth was the emotional richness I had found. The satisfaction of, for the first time in my life, living for myself. Edward visited every 3 months, not only as my lawyer, but as a loyal friend of decades. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd reacted differently?" he asked on his most recent visit. "If you had forgiven her immediately and continued as the sacrificing mother?" "Every day," I answered honestly. "And every day, I come to the same conclusion. I would have died, slowly, inside. I would have remained a victim of my own goodness, teaching Vanessa she could mistreat her mother without consequence. In the end, I did her a favor teaching her that every action carries a price." Daisy stopped visiting after the 3rd year. News of Vanessa had become too painful for us both. The last I heard, she had attempted suicide twice, lost multiple jobs to depression, and was nearly destitute in a tiny studio apartment. Guilt was eating her alive. "Don't you feel sorry for her?" Daisy once asked in our final conversation. "With all the compassion in the world," I replied. "But compassion does not erase what has been done. I spent 70 years caring for others, everyone, but myself. It was time to change that. One spring afternoon, while sorting through correspondence, I found an envelope that had arrived weeks earlier. My assistant had set it aside as instructed. It was from Vanessa. The shaky handwriting revealed the fragile state of mind of its writer. I opened it. For the first time in years, driven more by curiosity than nostalgia. Dear Mom, I know I have no right to write to you after everything I've done. I know I've forever lost the privilege of calling you Mom. But I need you to know. Not a single day passes that I don't regret every cruel word I ever said. I understand if you hate me. I hate myself too. I've lost everything. Marriage, money, friends, health, dignity. But the greatest loss is losing your love. I would rather be poor and alone than live knowing I destroyed the purest relationship of my life. I'm not asking for forgiveness because I don't deserve it. I only hope you know, your daughter died the day she called you worthless. If one day you want to know what happened to the little girl who once loved you more than life itself, find me at the cemetery, because the woman who betrayed you could not survive the weight of her guilt. I love you, Mom. Please forgive me in another life. I folded the letter. On the Mediterranean horizon, the sun dipped beneath the edge of the sea, leaving behind the last glow of a long day, just like the motherhood within me. Not extinguished, but set, making room for the peaceful night I had spent half a lifetime to earn. For the first time in 5 years, I panicked. I called Edward immediately. Find Vanessa at once. I'm afraid she'll do something desperate. You want me to help her? He asked, surprised. I want you to make sure she receives professional psychological support, but anonymously. That night I tossed and turned. Her letter had awakened something I thought long dead. Maternal instinct. Not blind love for the woman who betrayed me, but compassion for a human being suffering the weight of her own choices. That was the difference between love and pity. 2 days later, Edward called back. We found her just in time. She was hospitalized after another attempt on her life. She's now at a private psychiatric clinic. The costs are covered by an anonymous donation, as you requested. Will she recover? I asked. The doctors are optimistic, but say it will take years of deep therapy. Does she want to see me? Very much, but I explained the benefactor wishes to remain anonymous. She understands. Good, I sighed. I'm not ready, and maybe I never will be. 6 months later, Edward brought encouraging news. Vanessa is responding well to treatment. She accepts full responsibility, blames no one, not even Matthew. The therapists say it's the first step toward true healing. Did she ask about me? Only once, when told someone was covering her therapy. She asked if it was you. When told it couldn't be revealed, she said, "It doesn't matter who. My mother did enough for me for 30 years. The rest I must face on my own." Those words struck me to my core. For the first time in years, Vanessa showed the maturity and humility I had long hoped for. But it was too late for reconciliation. The wounds were too deep, and I had built a new life with no room for old pain. A year later, I received word Vanessa had been released. She became a volunteer at a rehab center, helping people who had hit rock bottom as she once had. They said she was dedicated, never spoke of her past, but carried special compassion for those who had lost family through their own mistakes. Do you plan to contact her? Edward asked one evening over dinner. No, I answered firmly. She learned her lesson, and so did I. We are now 2 different women. The love that once bound us died with the words she spoke that day. As I write these final lines in my journal at 76, I can say honestly, I have no regrets, not for loving unconditionally for 30 years, nor for cutting that love off when it became self-destruction. I've learned that forgiveness does not always mean reconciliation, and that sometimes loving someone means letting them go forever. Vanessa and I now live in parallel worlds. She rebuilt her life from the ashes of her mistakes. I enjoyed my remaining years, free of emotional burdens from the past. We both learned a priceless lesson. She, that words carry the power to destroy forever. I, that it is never too late to choose yourself. Motherhood does not truly die. It transforms into wisdom. The ability to love from a distance without letting that love become weakness. In the end, the greatest lesson I can leave my daughter is this: even the purest love has limits that cannot be crossed without paying an eternal price. Perhaps Cynthia's story is not only a private family tragedy, but a reminder for all of us. Love, if given only one way without respect in return, will sooner or later turn into a wound. A mother's love can be vast, but it too must be nourished with gratitude and dignity. Sometimes, the line between unconditional love and self-destruction in the name of love is very thin. Cynthia chose to hold on to her dignity and peace, and that is a lesson for anyone who has ever lost themselves trying to hold on to a relationship. And what about you? If you were in Cynthia's place, would you choose forgiveness? Or would you let go to find yourself again? Share your thoughts in the comments. I believe each perspective helps us better understand the true value of family and love. And if you'd like to join me in more stories like this, don't forget to follow so you won't miss the next journey.